We have among with us Dr. Chris Jenkins, OBE, President of Commonwealth Games Federation. It will be a keynote session and he will be speaking on streamlining governance in sports federations need of the hour. Everyone to give a big round of applause for Dr. Chris Jenkins, OBE, President of Commonwealth Games Federation. And we'll be speaking on multi-sports event, moving to a sustainable platform, reframing Commonwealth Games to a new model. Sir, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for asking me to join you at this very important event. So, what I'm going to touch on today is partly my doctoral thesis, but also then how we've been working over the last year, 18 months, to move the Commonwealth Games to a much more sustainable model. Perfect. So my doctoral thesis was very much on safeguarding the long-term future of the Commonwealth Games, an exploration of the potential for compromise on Games utopia for sustainability and attracting new hosts, as you can see there. So effectively, in a few minutes, I will touch on what is Games utopia. But the best way of explaining it is, if you asked an event owner to put on an event, and as a dominant stakeholder, it would ask for a huge amount, brand new facilities, and we'll come on to that in a minute. But effectively, that's the Games utopia. This was really a huge piece of qualitative research done, started before the pandemic and carried on all the way through COVID, and then written up afterwards. It took me about 3 years of research, talking to people all around the Commonwealth. And there were 40 participants. They were all experts in their areas, and many had experience of many different types of multi-sports events. There were 3 rounds of interviews as well, which 2 took place before Birmingham 22 Commonwealth Games, and the final one was afterwards to allow some element of reflection. So this is a diagram taken from a piece of work, a fantastic piece of work by Cassens Noor, which was effectively written on planning to permanent urbanisation. So just looking at it very much from the planning point of view, the pressure you put on a host city when hosting an Olympics, Commonwealth Games, FIFA World Cup. And as you can see from here, she wrote on the urban planning theory of mega events. And she looked at a concept called Games utopia. So I've developed it further. But effectively, you see here, at the very top is the utopia, the perfect mega event. And there are 3 columns running underneath: economy, image, and infrastructure. So from the economic point of view, all the gain goes to the event owner. All the risk sits with the host. So very asymmetric. And there's been a lot of academic research written on the value of the host city contract and the fact that this relationship is asymmetric. The image is very much around world-class athletes. Very much an athlete-focused experience, which is great. And we're not going to take away from that, but we can add something. And finally, on the infrastructure, the ideal, brand new everything. Brand new venues, world-class facilities, a central village, ideally brand new, also very close to the venues to minimise transport. So that's the perfect. And underneath, society, everybody, absolutely everyone is in favour of this model. So as a host, you all fantastically support it. So then we have the reality. So as I was working through, one of the things that was facing the mega event and the large event owners was a rapid decrease in the number of cities and countries wanting to host Utopia. It costs a fortune to do. So by talking to a large number of stakeholders and all the people through the research, some real key messages started to come out, which we'll look at in a second as we start to bring together the new framework. First of all, early, and I mean very early, meaningful, and meaningful is a key word here, engagement with the host community, starting to build that public support running into the event. Aligning a city or a country's development plan with the Games Master Plan. So the Games itself has a huge number of requests and demands it makes. So from the research it shows we should be doing those, but only if it aligns with things we were going to do in the first place. So you want an athletic stadium, you build one. You don't build one for the event. You build one and you use it for the event, and it has a permanent valuable legacy thereafter. Another point that came through very clearly, and this does depend on which countries you're in, but building new infrastructure gives great legacy, but also that's measurable, it's very, very real. Start to consider also the intangible benefits, social impact. So the social impact from hosting and from sport is huge. So you can start to measure that and put that in, and that's a very valuable legacy, a very valuable return on investment. Also came through as a demand very much from a better way of selecting hosts. End the competitive bidding. It's very expensive. It costs millions to bid to host some of these events. And there's a winner and a loser. The losers don't often come back. So you start to lose potential hosts. So competition is lovely in sport. There are winners and there are losers. In this particular area, working with a series of hosts is a much better way of doing it. That's something we have brought in at the Commonwealth Games Federation. And in fact, it's one of the reasons, apart from being with you today, I'm here in India at the moment, is you start to talk with governments at day one. What would you like this event to look like? So you build in the legacy, you build in the return on investment. But also, it's a much more proactive, but also collaborative approach to sourcing hosts. And that comes on to the next point, which this partnership must carry on all the way through the planning. So for a Commonwealth Games, it used to be a 7-year cycle to plan and deliver. In reality, you need 4 years, so let's cut to 4 years. It saves a lot of money, it's much more efficient, but also by sitting down day one, you can save a huge amount of time and costs. But fundamentally, there is a massive shift of power within the stakeholders. It's moving away from the event owner towards the host. It becomes collaborative. It becomes an equal relationship. So this is the framework that the thesis came up with. And as you can start to see, the pillars are still there. The roofs become a bit more complicated, but the basis is still there as well. So let's go through bottom up. So society, where before there was assumed to be 100% public support, and we know from what we've been looking at over the experience of the last 20 odd years, when consulted, referenda, invariably the local community said no. You can turn that around by engaging right at the start of the process. So you have engaged and involved citizens, which means meaningful engagement, means meaningful participation from every facet of society that's hosting. So it has targeted social legacies, which we touched on. It's inclusive, so it's every part of society, because the people who are going to benefit most are often those who lost most in hosting, so they could really benefit. On the economy, we now have a partnership of risk. We have shared risk. So by reducing the costs and realigning to what the development plan of the city is required, so you're not saying do this, you're saying I want to do this for all sorts of reasons, you start to bring down costs, but you start to get better returns on investment, and you avoid negative legacy, a stadium that no one wants at the end of the day. The athlete experience is still there, but it becomes a concept of shared image, because both parties can win here. Repositioning a country or a city in the global context, the image of that city, but also the sense of place is very important. So you have shared image. The athletes have a fantastic time. They get their exposure. The city gets its exposure. And then the infrastructure, by aligning to the existing development plan, you're delivering facilities and infrastructure that the city needs and the city wants and would have built anyway, and you're using those. And you only build new where it's desired. And you use existing facilities. Brings down costs, it's much more efficient, and gives a far higher return on investment, both real and social. Then move up, I've got host city, proactive support for new cities to bid. So that's our role, to go out and spread the message and say, these are the benefits you can get. You should be thinking about hosting. We can work with you. We can collaborate with you to deliver the things that you want. And at the very top, the willingness of our members within our organisation to compromise, to accept that some of the power has shifted away from them towards the host. So it's taking Cassandor's model and modifying it. And that was the basis of what we've now built, how we get a Commonwealth Games to a sustainable new platform. So we combine this research with the strategic desire of the Commonwealth Sport, the Commonwealth Games Federation, and its strategic plan, Commonwealth United. A lot of this work's been done previously. The Games Value Framework identified positive legacies. And I'd now like to share with you Commonwealth Sport's new sustainable model for the Games, repositioning the Games and sport at the heart of the Commonwealth, increasing its value. So we touched on the more theoretical side of what we've been doing. Now here's the more practical side. So let's look at sport. Let's look at the power of sport. So sport is beautiful. Sport helped me be who I am. Sport gave me life. Sport shaped my character. Sport developed me as a person. Sport took me to school, and sport gave me work. So we're looking at the positive reasons for doing sport. These inspiring words of Samson Nakutu from Kenya, who was at a GAPS camp. GAPS is a program that we run at Commonwealth Sport. It's disability inclusion. And he was at the camp. He's been at the camp as an athlete and now as a coach. Now as a child, Samson suffered from polio. He ran away from home when he was just 9 years old, and he lived on the streets of Nairobi. He became a Paralympian through sport, and he's now an inspirational powerlifting coach, and he is an amazing person. He's truly inspirational to his athletes. But he demonstrates the power of sport, how it can transform, how it can be a transformative force for good. So earlier, we touched on how you align the wishes of the local community to hosting by widespread, inclusive, meaningful engagement. Here we're now going to start to see how you use sport to drive forward within society. Because sport has the unparalleled ability to address some of the most urgent challenges we face today. Things we've been talking about this morning. Sport is an amazing place to have conversations about very difficult global issues. It also has a fantastic return on investment. We touched on earlier how we can get return on investment through hosting. But just sport itself, there's a new piece of research out from Sport, England, Wales and Scotland. And it's a piece of research run by University of Sheffield Hallam, which shows there's a social return on investment of 4.4 times. So for every dollar you spend in sport, you get a social return on investment of $4.4. It's a remarkable number. However, and I think it's a real tragedy. Now, not the case here in India. We've been talking with a lot of politicians over the last few days about how sport is being moved up the agenda. That is not the case in a large number of countries in the Commonwealth and within the world. Sport has fallen far too far down the political agenda. It is too low in government priorities in far too many countries in the world. And we need to reverse this trend together. We can leverage the power of sport. We can change mindsets. We can enhance national development priorities through sports. And one of the challenges and one of the opportunities we have at Commonwealth Games Federation is the Games themselves are the largest positive manifestation of the Commonwealth. So the whole world looks towards us. So sport creates this safe place to have difficult discussions, but it also allows us, it's given us a great opportunity to reposition sport within the Commonwealth. So what we've done is we've identified a series of wealths within Commonwealth. So we're going to touch on each of these. There's sport wealth, diplomatic wealth, economic wealth, social wealth, and cultural wealth. And sitting right at the heart is Commonwealth United. It's saying we as an organisation, we as the Commonwealth Games, we as Commonwealth Sport can do anything, can really help you within the Commonwealth, can help governments achieve their priorities. So it increases the relevance of Commonwealth sport to the youth of the Commonwealth. It enhances resilience. And this new wealth model puts the Games back at the heart of the Commonwealth. It puts sport back at the heart of the Commonwealth. And it makes it relevant to all people within the Commonwealth. So let's look at each of them in turn. And it starts to understand then how a sustainable model can really enhance what we do. So looking at diplomatic wealth. Well, you've had a lot of diplomatic wealth here over the last few days. You've been sitting and talking, representing your organisations coming from different countries, talking about the issues that you face back at home and working collectively. So sport brings nations together, fosters exchange, mutual respect, strengthens ties between the countries, and presents many opportunities for sharing, cooperating, and advancing global goals and peace. Sport can be a unifying force, but more importantly, it gives everyone a voice, and that voice can be listened, and it can promote both national and Commonwealth identities. So you've experienced diplomatic wealth. You bring countries together, put them in a room, those ministers, those people, those athletes, those coaches, government officials, they create diplomatic wealth. And that happens all around a big event like a Commonwealth Games. It's a real value. So let's look at sport wealth. Whether it's the Olympics or the Commonwealth Games or the youth versions or FIFA World Cup, they all look for excellence, focuses on the elite. Sport wealth is much, much more than that. Through sport, individuals and communities flourish. What is sport but activity, health, well-being, social cohesion, teamwork, builds respect, tolerance, creates spaces for young people to thrive. A strong, inclusive sports system means no one is left behind, from grassroots up to elite. And we can demonstrate how sport can really change mindsets. So on the right, the extreme right, you will see a lady called Friana. She was at Gold Coast Games, and that's a picture of her on the podium. I mentioned GAPS earlier on. It's a disability inclusion program. So it allows disabled people who are in many of our Commonwealth countries who are probably hidden away to come out, join in sport. So she went to the first camp, a pilot project run in Australia in Griffith University. She had a week of coaching, sports science, fitness, well-being tests. At the end, we asked her, "What's your key takeaway?" And she said, "It's the first time I've ever been treated as a human being." I thought, wow, this is an amazing program. She then went on to an amazing final at the Games. She got a bronze medal. She went home. She comes from Vanuatu, small islands in the Pacific. Their first ever medal, a female, a para-athlete, feted around the country. Great response. Mindsets need to be changed. A week later, a lady walks into a school holding the hand of her disabled daughter and says, "Does this now mean my daughter can come to school?" We need to do more. We need to change mindsets. Sport can do that. Within the Commonwealth, if you're a disabled girl, it's very low chance you have any education at all. And it's not much better for boys either. 70 to 90% will not have an education. It's got to change. Sport, by talking about this, by demonstrating this as we do in conferences, sitting down with ministers, has the power to change mindsets. Commonwealth Games is integrated. Able-bodied para-athletes coming together. It changes mindsets. So let's look at social wealth. Change the slide. There we go. Social wealth. Using the power of sport, you can make a massive difference, contribution to social inclusion, human rights, education, historic injustice, enhancing climate resilience right across the Commonwealth. You can have difficult conversations. It's part of the social wealth that exists, something you've all been doing over the last few days. Commonwealth Games is really proud because it is the most inclusive event there is, whether it's gender, disability or youth. And it can make amazing interventions. And I'm going to use another story to illustrate this. Again, lady on the right, she comes from Pakistan. She came to one of our camps on her own. So to get her there was no mean feat. So cast your minds back just after the pandemic, around sort of Easter time, sort of March, April 22. We ran the camp, and the previous few weeks, months, the Pakistan Commonwealth Games Association had been up in the community. It's on the northern part of Pakistan, talking to her family, to the community, to allow this athlete to come to the camp. Long list of conditions about what she cannot do. She came, it was brilliant, she had a fantastic time. She took loads of videos. She went back home. So to get her there was a huge effort. Family involved, community involved, coaches involved. Roll on the clock just a few years. 2 girls came from the same area to a camp. So we talked to them. So Zainab had gone back with all the videos. She'd spoken within her community. She'd gone around chatting to people, saying what a great time she had, how useful it was, how it really helped her athletic career. She's in table tennis. When the two girls came to the next camp 2 years later, they had spoken to their families, nobody else. They had spoken to their communities, and 15 came to a camp in Pakistan, 2 then came on to Birmingham. So these young girls had been empowered, all in the space of 2 to 3 years, because of a real champion who'd gone home and made something happen, created huge change, huge social wealth. That again is what sport can do. So let's look at economic wealth as well. Another reason for hosting, for putting sporting events on, is an economic return. Too often it's been measured in maybe a bit of increased tourism. There's lots of ways you can measure the success. But the real wealth that comes is what you can do with an event. How do you make it much more sustainable? Well, sport itself is a large part of the economy. It boosts economies, employments right around the world. Developing a vibrant sports industry is a great way of increasing economic wealth within a country. But you can use the games, you can use an event to promote international trade, tourism, infrastructure development, innovation, promotion, engage and involve young people throughout, engage and bring marginalised communities into work through training and skills development and employment. And to give you an example, straight after the closing ceremony of the Birmingham 22 Games, Andy Street, who was the mayor of West Midlands, one of the host mayors, was on a plane with 10 or 12 business leaders to India. And some of the Indian companies had been at Birmingham as well, bringing in the trade mission over here, brought in foreign direct investment. And Birmingham got a fantastic return from that. Their foreign direct investment was up 27%. But what they did is they used the games as a catalyst to do something else, to develop their economy. But I would also say, hosting an event along the side, you would have something like a trade event. Why Sri Lanka should be showcasing its tea. India should be showcasing its products at an event like this, because the world is looking on the event, but also that's where the business leaders and the politicians are. So let's also look at culture, the cultural wealth you get from coming together. So a couple of slides, but what is the Commonwealth? But an amazing celebration of cultural diversity, celebrating differences, honouring differences. So we want to honour the rich diversity of the cultures of the Commonwealth as an inclusive movement, not only promoting cultural exchange, but preserving cultural diversity, celebrating what makes us unique through mutual respect, pride and unity, honouring traditional cultures, bringing forward traditional games, showcasing those sports alongside the Olympic and the Commonwealth sports. So take this example here, archery. There's one Olympic discipline. At most games there might be 2 disciplines, compound and recurve. Barebow, as it's called, is archery that is global. Showcase that event, showcase that sport. There are lots of sports. So we've been talking about bringing 1 or 2 traditional sports into a games as a demonstration sport to help not only promote these games, but preserve them. Because my fear is that many of these in 20 or 30 years' time will have vanished unless we protect them. And they're an important part of our culture. They're a very important part of making us who we are. So I show here a fale, which is a meeting house, effectively, from Samoa. And this Reframe games that we're offering and talking about offers an open space for dialogue and opportunity, for having difficult conversations. And through the games, through the Commonwealth Games, the Youth Games, the development work, the policy initiatives we have. There is so much we can do together by uniting the Commonwealth through sport. So each of the worlds has the same value, the same height within the Farley. And you come inside the Farley and you speak openly and honestly to each other. But also, we've taken some really positive steps to reset the Games, to make the Games models more sustainable, which is what you've been touching on over the last 3 days. So the first thing to say, I think the old paradigm's gone. We've got to change mindsets into what we can do together, not a series of obligations. A co-created event where host communities, ourselves, and our member come together to design an event. So the first point, I'll just run through them. Purpose-driven games. The Games is purpose-driven with a renewed focus on Commonwealth United by Sport through creating sporting, diplomatic, economic, cultural and social wealth. We've replaced that competitive bid, that smashing into each other I mentioned right at the beginning, where you have a winner and a loser you never hear back from. So it's a collaborative dialogue between the host governments, the CGAs, and it leads to the co-creation of not only a Games, but in creating a pipeline as well. Reducing the hosting cost. Our ambition and our aim, and we will do it, is to reduce the hosting costs by at least 60% from the old costs that we used to see. This will allow more countries to bid, more communities to get involved. By using existing venues and sport for accommodation, which was in one of those pillars I showed you in the Reframe model. With little need for capital investment, there is really much more certainty in the way you can budget, much more certainty in the timelines. And typically when you look at where things have gone wrong in the past, mainly from the Olympics, it's because costs have crept up, because there's a deadline, but also they're building a huge amount as well. It's very hard to forecast a budget 7 to 10 years out. You're going to have at least one economic cycle and at least 1 or 2 political cycles. So it is really difficult. Reduce the timeline to 4 years, but also if you're only using existing or you're trying to use an existing accommodation, you have some certainty. That removes the risk. That removes the need to have very large guarantees. You don't have to have an unlimited financial underwrite because you don't need it, because you can budget with a large element of certainty and manage your contingency. On the other side, the benefits on the legacy, if you sit down from day one, you can shape a Games to deliver what you want from in legacy and benefit local communities. So you build that in from right at the start. The sport programme can be adapted. It's got to move with the times. We often say, and the Olympics does this as well, you can bring in a new sport. It's very easy to say hello to a new friend. It's very difficult to say goodbye to an old friend. So they get bigger and bigger and bigger, and more unsustainable. You have to be brutal and say the Games have got to manage, stay in touch with the youth, and maintain your core structure. Also recognise, as I touched on earlier, the value of traditional sports, showcasing those as well. So there's a lot you can do around sport by optimising the programme. Fully integrated, we're not moving away from that at all. We're totally committed to an integrated para-sport programme within the Games, but also supporting it through the para-athlete development pathway work we do with GAPS. We also consider co-hosting. In fact, we encourage it in some regions. Bringing countries together creates diplomatic wealth, but also shares the benefit and shares the costs, and opens up hosting to many, many more countries. Not an issue here, but if you look in many parts of the world, staging a large event requires a huge amount of work. 2 or 3 countries coming together can share that workload, but also share the benefits. Touch on the collaborative process throughout. And the other thing we want to do is set an environmental target. These have all, the amount of carbon has been measured from Birmingham, the information then passed on to Paris. So we can now start to set targets. We know what impact it has on the environment. Let's start to scale it down, but also start to bring in some real sustainability initiatives to achieve these targets. These are all embedded in the Games hosting vision. So our next Games, in not very long, next year in 26, will be in Glasgow. Some of these principles have been implemented within the Glasgow programme, and there will be significant transfer of knowledge as well going on to future hosts. So the Glasgow Games themselves in 26 are a hugely important step towards the Commonwealth Games of the future. So we've been inviting governments to come in and sit with us in the Farley to talk to us. We've been inviting our members to come and sit inside the Farley and talk to us, to talk about their role and what their ambitions are to hosting and reset the Games. Because we're really excited that we're now building up to our 100th anniversary. 2030 will be our centenary Games. But also, by reframing the Games, we've put Commonwealth sport back at the centre of the Commonwealth. We're putting sport back at the centre of the Commonwealth. We're saying to governments, to all sectors of society, sport is really important. Sport, the power of sport needs to be used. It needs to be nurtured. It needs to be invested in. Because sport can generate all of these values across, whether it's health and well-being, bringing countries together through diplomatic wealth, celebrating cultural diversity, generating economic wealth, and generally generating social benefits for all sections of the society. I did at one point, I think, did I put the slide on? Yes. So some of these are the key academic articles out there which we can share with you. But looking at how it's driven the research, identifying the problems, building on all the research that's been done over the last 10, 20 years about how we can reposition multi-sports events and make them much, much more sustainable. But thank you all very much for inviting me here today. Really enjoyed it, so I hope you found it useful. Thank you.